At 3:14 a.m., the heavy brass handle of my motel room door didn't just rattle. It turned slowly and deliberately until it hit the deadbolt with a metallic thud. The problem was, I'd checked in less than an hour ago at a place that supposedly had no other guests. And as I sat there in the dark, I realized the person on the other side wasn't using a key. They were leaning their entire body weight against the wood, breathing so loudly I could hear the wet whistle in their lungs through the gap in the doorframe. Who was watching me pull off the highway? How did they know exactly which room I was in when the neon vacancy sign was the only light for 10 miles? I'm not a paranoid person by nature. I work as a long-haul courier, the kind of job where you spend more time with a podcast than a person. I'm used to empty stretches of road and the occasional weirdo at a gas station. But there's a specific kind of silence you find in the high desert of eastern Oregon, a silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing against your eardrums. I had been driving for 14 hours. My eyes were doing that thing where the white lines on the asphalt start to look like they're slithering. I knew I couldn't make the last 3 hours to Boise. I needed a bed, even if it was a bad one. I saw the sign for the Dusty Rose Motor Court about a half-mile back. It was one of those old-school, U-shaped motels from the 50s. The pink paint had bleached into a ghostly gray, and half the letters in the sign were dead. The office was a small glass box. Inside sat a man who looked like he'd been dried out by the sun. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't even ask for my name. He just pushed a physical brass key across the counter, room 14, and took my $40 in cash. "End of the row," he said. His voice sounded like sandpaper. "Don't mind the noise. The pipes are old." I didn't think much of it. I drove my truck to the very end of the lot, parked right in front of the door to room 14, and hauled my bag inside. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial-strength bleach, a combination that usually means a place is trying to hide something. But at 2 a.m., I didn't care. I flicked on the bedside lamp, which cast a weak, yellow glow over a floral bedspread that looked older than I was. I did what I always do. I locked the knob, flipped the deadbolt, and engaged the little swing-arm security latch. I stripped down to my undershirt, brushed my teeth with bottled water, and laid down. That's when the silence started to feel wrong. In a normal motel, you hear things. A toilet flushing next door, a car door slamming, the hum of an ice machine. But here, there was nothing. No wind. No crickets. Just the sound of my own pulse. I lay there for maybe 20 minutes, drifting in that hazy space between awake and asleep, when I heard the first footstep. It wasn't on the sidewalk outside. It sounded like it was right against the wall. A slow, dragging sound. I sat up. My heart gave a little decorative thump against my ribs. I told myself it was just the old pipes the guy mentioned, or maybe a stray dog. I waited. The scraping stopped. I settled back down, forcing my muscles to relax. Then came the turn of the door handle. It wasn't a frantic jiggle. It was a firm, rhythmic pressure. Someone was testing the lock to see if I'd been lazy. When the deadbolt held, the pressure didn't stop. They stayed there. That's when I heard the breathing. It was heavy, labored, and unnervingly close. I didn't yell. I didn't ask, "Who's there?" because something in my gut told me that acknowledging the presence would make it worse. I just stared at the door. In the dim yellow light, I saw the handle slowly return to its horizontal position. Then, the shadow under the door vanished. They had moved away. I should have called the front office. I reached for the landline on the nightstand, but the cord had been cleanly snipped. Not frayed, not broken, cut. My stomach dropped. I reached for my cell phone. No service. I shouldn't have been surprised. The canyon walls out here are notorious for dead zones, but seeing that "no service" text in the corner of the screen felt like a death sentence. I stayed frozen for another 10 minutes. I thought about grabbing my keys and sprinting to the truck, but my truck was parked right outside. If someone was out there, I'd be cornered before I could even get the engine over. I decided to move to the window. I kept the lights off and peeled back the edge of the heavy, moth-eaten curtain just an inch. The parking lot was bathed in the flickering blue light of a single pole lamp near the entrance. My truck was there, looking lonely. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed something. The office, the little glass box where I'd checked in, was dark. Completely dark, and the vacancy sign was off. Then I looked at the room next to mine. Room 12. The door was cracked open. Just a sliver. Enough for a single eye to look out. I felt a chill crawl up my spine that made my skin prickle. I realized then that I hadn't seen any other cars in the lot when I pulled in. I was the only one here. So who was in room 12? And why were they waiting? I backed away from the window, tripping over my own boots. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. I needed a weapon. I looked around the room. A plastic ice bucket, a flimsy wooden chair, a heavy glass ashtray. I grabbed the ashtray. It wasn't much, but it was solid. That's when the sound started again. But it wasn't the door this time. It was coming from the bathroom. The bathroom in room 14 was a tiny, windowless closet at the back of the unit. I had used it briefly to brush my teeth. I remembered the shower curtain, a thick, yellowed plastic, being pulled shut. The faucet was leaking. I hadn't noticed it before. But then, I heard a metallic clack, the sound of a tile being moved. Most of these old motels have a crawl space or a shared utility corridor that runs behind the bathrooms for the plumbing. I stared at the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I saw the shower curtain move. Not a breeze. It was pushed from behind. Someone wasn't just outside my room. They were already inside the walls. I stood up, gripping the ashtray so hard my knuckles turned white. My breathing was shallow. I realized I couldn't stay in the room. If I stayed, I was a sitting duck. I had to get to the truck. I didn't care about my luggage. I didn't care about my shoes. I just needed to move. I crept toward the front door. Every floorboard felt like it was screaming under my weight. I reached for the deadbolt. My hand was shaking so violently, I almost couldn't grip the metal. I unlocked the swing arm. I turned the deadbolt. Click. The sound felt like a gunshot in the silence. I waited. I expected the door to be kicked in. I expected the person from room 12 to tackle me. But nothing happened. I counted to 3 in my head. 1, 2, 3. I flung the door open and bolted. The night air was freezing, biting into my lungs. I scrambled for my pockets, fishing for my keys. I hit the unlock button, and the lights of my truck flashed. The chirp-chirp of the alarm felt like a lifeline. I dove into the driver's seat and slammed the door, locking it instantly. I fumbled the key into the ignition and cranked it. The engine roared to life. I threw the truck into reverse, ready to floor it out of that gravel lot and never look back. But as the backup camera flickered on, I froze. In the grainy night vision glow of the screen, I saw the man from the front office. He was standing directly behind my truck. He wasn't moving. He wasn't trying to stop me. He was just standing there. And he was holding my bag, the bag I'd left in the room. But that wasn't what made my blood turn to ice. It was the fact that he was wearing my jacket, the one I'd hung on the back of the bathroom door. He looked up into the camera, and even through the low-resolution screen, I could see he was smiling. It wasn't a malicious grin. It was the empty, vacant smile of someone who wasn't really there. Behind him, the door to room 12 swung wide open. 3 other people stepped out. They weren't monsters. They weren't wearing masks. They were just people, ordinary-looking men and women in muted, dusty clothes. They stood in a line, perfectly still, watching me. I didn't wait. I slammed the truck into drive, hopped the curb, and tore out of that parking lot. I didn't stop until I hit a brightly lit truck stop 60 miles away. I walked into the station, trembling, covered in a cold sweat. I found a state trooper getting coffee, and practically fell over myself trying to tell him what happened. I told him about the motel, the man, the people in the parking lot. The trooper looked at me with a mix of pity and confusion. "Son," he said, setting his coffee down. "The Dusty Rose Motor Court burned to the ground in '98. There's nothing out there but a concrete slab and some scorched timber." I told him he was wrong. I told him I'd paid $40. I showed him the brass key I still had clutched in my hand. He took the key and frowned. He turned it over. It was old, rusted, and the tag said room 14. But the metal was pitted with age, and the edges were blunt. It didn't look like a key that had been used in decades. "I'll have a cruiser head out that way," he promised. "But you look like you need some sleep." I didn't sleep. I sat in that truck stop until the sun came up. A few hours later, the trooper came back. He didn't look sympathetic anymore. He looked pale. "We found the site," he said. Like I told you, it's just ruins. No office, no rooms, just weeds and trash. Then where was I? I asked, my voice cracking. The trooper rubbed his face. We found something else. Your truck tracks were there. They lead right up to the spot where the room 14 foundation used to be. Your luggage was there, too, neatly piled on a concrete slab in the middle of the dirt. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. And the people? The trooper hesitated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, clear evidence bag. Inside was a scrap of fabric. We found your jacket, he said. It was folded up on the ground, but we also found this tucked into the pocket. He held up the bag. Inside was a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, not from a distance. It was a close-up. I was asleep on the floral bedspread of room 14. The yellow light of the lamp was hitting my face. But the terrifying part wasn't the photo itself. It was the date stamp in the bottom corner. It didn't say 2026. It didn't say 1998. The date on the photo was today's date, but the timestamp was 3:45 a.m. That was 30 minutes after I had already fled the motel. I don't go through Eastern Oregon anymore. I took a different job, one that keeps me in the city, surrounded by lights and people and noise. I never want to be in a place that's that quiet again, because sometimes when I'm lying in my own bed at home, I'll hear it. The sound of a heavy brass handle turning, the feeling of someone leaning their weight against the door, and then the sound of someone breathing, heavy, wet, and whistling through the gap in the frame. I haven't looked under the door. I'm too afraid of what I might see, or rather, what might be looking back. The worst part isn't the fear that someone is trying to get in. It's the realization I had a few weeks ago while looking at that old brass key. I never gave it back, and if I still have the key to room 14, then technically, I never checked out. Every night, I wonder if those people are still standing in that gravel lot, waiting for the guest who left his bag behind. I wonder if the man in the office is still wearing my jacket, sitting in the dark, waiting for me to come back and finish my stay. Because in the high desert, things don't just disappear. They just wait for the right person to pull off the highway. And I'm starting to think that once you check into a place like that, you don't ever really leave. You just carry the room with you. Sometimes I catch a whiff of it, the smell of stale cigarettes and bleach. It lingers in the back of my closet or under the sink. And whenever I see a pink neon sign, even if it's just for a diner or a bar, I feel my heart stop. Because I know that somewhere out there, in the middle of a concrete ruin, there's a bed with a floral bedspread that's still warm, and it's waiting for me to come back and close my eyes. The problem is, I don't think I'll ever be able to close them again. Not without wondering who is standing over me with a camera, waiting for the perfect shot. If you're ever driving through the desert and you see a sign for a place that looks like it should have been torn down years ago, don't look at it. Don't slow down. Don't even think about how tired you are, because the vacancy sign might be off, but they always have room for one more. And once they have your picture, they don't need you to be there for the story to continue. They just need you to remember the sound of the handle turning. It's been a month, and the handle on my apartment door just moved. I live on the 4th floor. There's no balcony, and I can hear the breathing.